Hi and welcome to Mondraker TV. For today's video we are going to be breaking down all the different types of mountain bike available, because once upon a time mountain bikes were a singular thing. There was only one and you rode it for everything, up, down, over, along and everything in the middle. But today we have 6 major race categories, and of course there's new disciplines and bike genres emerging all the time, which can make it really confusing if you're trying to identify what you need from a mountain bike. So let's break down all the different bike categories. Mountain bikes, they're just so cool, aren't they? I mean, you've only got to look through your social media feed to see how much cool stuff there is out there. I mean, here I've got cross-country racers absolutely pushing their bodies to the limit, and I've got free riders hitting huge jumps and slapping turns, spraying up dust and stuff. It's just super cool. And then you've got downhill racers just riding the fastest speeds at the most technical, gnarly terrain ever. All of this is super cool, and all of this is really influential, which therein lies the problem, because you can become too influenced by what you see on these rather than what you actually need from your mountain bike. Let's go to the studio, shall we? Okay, first up we have the Hardtail. Now, as you imagine, it's because it doesn't have any suspension on the back of the bike there at all. You just have a suspension fork at the front, and because of this you can get bikes made from any material. So typically you'll see steel, aluminium and carbon fibre, and you'll see them in any genre as well. So although it's a hardtail, you can have jump bikes, you can have kids bikes, you can have cross-country bikes, and you can have trail bikes like this one. Now, hardtails range from 16-inch wheel kids bikes up to 20s, 24s, 26, 27.5s and 29-inch wheels. Now, typically you will find hardtails will have anything from 100mm of travel in terms of suspension forks up to about 140. So general rule of thumb, of course there are exceptions to this. This particular bike here has a 120mm travel fork on the front. It's got a slightly relaxed head angle. It's got a dropper post on there. So as you could probably gather, this bike has more technical capabilities, as just hinted at there from the setup of the bike. This one's also running on 29-inch wheels, so it's definitely at the upper end of what the capability is for the hardtail. Now, due to the simplicity in most hardtails, i.e. just the frame design itself, they're a very broad category and they can have a really big range of pricing, ranging from budget all the way through to high end, like this one, the Chrono Carbon DC. As such, the hardtail, very much so, is the entry point into mountain biking for many riders. Okay, so now we're on to cross-country bikes. Okay, I can see what you're thinking. There's a hardtail in front of me. Well, the truth is, yes, this is a hardtail, but this is a very specialist hardtail. So I've chosen to put a podium in with the cross-country bikes because of the fact this is an extreme bike. It's extremely light. It weighs less than 9 kilograms. It's everything that a cross-country race bike needs to be: light, agile, responsive, and very fast across the ground. So whereas most hardtails in that previous category will be durable bikes for all-round riding, a cross-country bike is a bit more of a compromise. So it has very lightweight wheels and very lightweight tyres designed to shed any rotating weight possible. Now I'm just going to swap this over now to the F Podium, which is our cross-country race bike. So this was designed around the category known as XCO, or Cross Country Olympic. So this is the highest end of cross-country racing there is, period. It is the absolute extreme, and thus the bikes need to be extremely light, extremely capable, and they obviously have to have a whole bunch of different things going on. Now, over the last 10 years or so, cross-country racing has got more and more technical, which is why you're seeing bikes looking as extreme as the F Podium. So this is running 115mm of travel out back, 120 on the front. So that's a bit more commonplace from where cross-country started with around 100mm of travel. So in terms of geometry on the bikes, most classic cross-country bikes will have a head tube angle of around 68.5 degrees and a seat angle of around 74 or 75 degrees. The F Podium is the latest and probably the most extreme variant out there. You're talking about a 66.5 degree head angle and a 76.2 degree seat angle on there. So much steeper to position the rider further into the bike, which is further accentuated by our forward geometry. Now, if you want to know about that stuff, we've got more videos available on the channel. Let's start moving on to some of the spec on a bike like this. So it has a 1x transmission. Again, this is all out about racing. Extremely lightweight tyres and wheel combination on there. If you think that that's the rotating mass, that's why the tyres barely have any tread on them. They're designed to be the fastest possible. This is one of the compromises that cross-country racers need to make compared to more aggressive options that we're going to see a bit later in this video. Now, the frame material on cross-country bikes can be aluminium, it can be carbon fibre, but with the full suspension bikes, you do tend to see, like this one, a lot of carbon fibre options out there to both give a frame that's stiff and compliant and also keep that weight down. Okay, next up, the trail bike category. Now, characteristically, these have a little bit more suspension than a cross-country bike, and they're a little bit burlier. Now, historically, they were pretty much the same as a cross-country bike, just built with tougher components, made a bit more suitable as an all-day bike. But over the years, the category has just slightly shifted over a bit. Now that cross-country bikes have their own place, the trail bike has become probably the most do-it-all equivalent of a bike out there. Now, they'll be slightly heavier than a cross-country bike. Again, it's still an extremely lightweight bike, but it's definitely a lot stiffer. It will have angles and suspension performance that gives you a bit more confidence and stability in pretty much all situations. Now, the trail bike, you will find these in alloy and carbon as the most common options on the market. This is a raise, and this one is running 130mm travel on the rear end and 150 on the front end. Now, the trail bike category, you can have a huge variation of suspension travel on the bikes, but as a minimum, you'd be looking at 120mm travel front and rear, ranging up to 150 on the rear, and at a maximum probably 150, 160 on the front end there. As I said, the raise is 130, 150, so it's just broadly in the middle there. Now, this is an extremely lightweight bike. As I said, you could actually build this light enough to be a cross-country bike, or you could build it with heavier, burlier wheels and tyres, put a chain guide on there, do all sorts of stuff, and it could hang out with bigger travel, all mountain and enduro bikes. This is why this category is so versatile. Now, in terms of geometry, you're looking at a slacker head angle typically than the cross-country bikes. So anything from 65.5 back to about 64 degrees you can expect to see on trail bikes, and a seat angle anything from 76.5 up to about 78 degrees. Now, like all of our bikes, this one is running forward geometry, so it has the short stem and the long front center there. So having a steeper seat angle is beneficial to keep the rider centralized on the bike. This is both great for climbing and descending, push you around the fulcrum of the bike. As I hinted at a minute ago, you can build a trail bike to be lightweight or on the burlier side of things, but typically you'll find that the wheels will be 29-inch wheel due to the nature that the bike has to cover as much as possible in terms of up, down, over and along, a slightly lower profile design, and you can expect to see tyres anything from 2.3 up to 2.6, depending on how aggressive that particular bike is. Front tyres will always be a bit more aggressive if you think of the fact that they're there for the absolute control of the bike. And just hitting home the fact that really the trail bike is probably the best do-it-all option for any mountain biker. So if you're not sure what to look at, whether you want to be a hardtail, cross-country, trail, enduro, whatever, start by looking here, because you can move either way from it. This is the most versatile style of mountain bike available. Okay, let's have another little spin, and we're into the all-mountain and enduro category. Now, this can be quite confusing due to the name. So all-mountain is how these bikes have historically been known, due to the fact that you can ride up almost anything, over anything, and descend anything. So they're a more aggressive version of a trail bike, but the enduro tag in here will be confusing to people because of the fact enduro is a race discipline. Now, a fundamental difference between an all-mountain bike and an enduro bike would just be the specification on the bike. Essentially, they're the same platforms. You're going to find things like on an enduro bike, like heavier downhill style tyres, softer rubber compound. You might even find more aggressive things like coil shocks. But fundamentally, the frames are pretty much the same. The compromise there between the two is the all-mountain bikes are better at being ridden all day long on any terrain, whereas the enduro-focused bikes are just aimed a bit burlier at racing. Now, the frame designs of all-mountain and enduro bikes can be very similar to trail bikes. So if you skip between them, you can see like the Rays I've just shown you and the Foxy that we're looking at now. They're very similar in terms of frame design, but look a bit closer and you can see the Foxy is a burlier bike. So you can see the shock absorber is bigger on there. You can see it has a piggyback reservoir on there. That's because a longer travel bike that's going to be ridden harder on longer descents, the shock is going to get warm, the fluid on the inside is going to get warm, which means you're going to suffer inconsistencies in damping if it gets too warm. The piggyback reservoir allows more fluid, basically, so a higher performing rear shock. It's a bit of a telltale sign of the difference between the two. You can also see that the rocker linkage there is bigger, there's more material on it, and the same goes for the frame. Everywhere on here, from the head tube down the down tube there, the bottom bracket area, there's more going on. Because of the bike's intention to hit things harder and faster, it has to obviously have a bit more in terms of frame material there to support that. Now, all mountain enduro bikes, they can be made from alloy, they can be made from carbon fiber, like the one in front of me here. So as far as geometry goes, a little bit more aggressive than trail bikes, but not a million miles apart. So you're going to see anything from 65.5 degree head angles back to 63.5 in some cases there. Seat angles, again, 76.5 or 75.5, up to about 78 degrees. Now, sometimes on these bikes, you're going to find options for adjustable geometry or adjustable chainstay length, just to fine tune some of the attributes on the bike. These days, you'll find that 29-inch wheels are a bit more dominant in terms of wheel sizing. Traditionally, this category, you would have seen 27.5-inch wheels. As I said, you mostly see 29s now. You do see some 27.5s on smaller bikes, and you're also seeing options to run a 27.5-inch rear wheel, sometimes known as a mullet setup. Now, also in the all-mountain and enduro category, you're going to see a huge percentage of e-mountain bikes. Now, of course, you can get lighter weight e-mountain bikes that sit in the hardtail class, for example, but really it's here that the major advantages come in of having a battery and a motor system on a bike. So we've got bikes like the Crafty, bikes like the Neat. There's loads of different options available out there. And one of the coolest things about these bikes is the additional weight that they have. So that can sound like a negative to people because you've got a battery on there that's heavy, you've got a motor on there that's heavy, but that really does sort out the distribution of the sprung to unsprung mass on these bikes. So what you get, in addition to having the assistance up the hill, is suspension that feels incredible, because effectively your front and rear of the bike feel extremely light because of the fact you've got the weight on the main frame, just like on a motorbike in fact. And a lot of people that will ride these bikes will tell you just how good they feel when you're hitting rough terrain. And actually, even though the bikes only have 150mm travel on the rear in this category, many people will tell you that these bikes feel just as stable and capable as a downhill bike, and that's really why these bikes are becoming so popular. Okay, moving up now to enduro race, or super enduro as you might hear it referred to. The bike you can see here is the Super Foxy. So this one looks very similar to the Foxy, the same exact frame layout, but look closer, you've got a big burly coil shock on here, you've got a longer travel fork, you've got tyres with softer compound rubber and armoured casing on here. So these bikes are designed to be able to handle the worst terrain imaginable. Like, they're up there with the same sort of capability and intention as downhill bikes, but you have to be able to get them back up to the top again. Now, also in this same category, you see bikes like the Level, which is an e-bike equivalent, and really it's almost like an e-downhill bike. So these bikes are extremely burly with loads of travel, and really, if you want to just shuttle the hillside all day long with a focus coming down, this is the sort of category you want to be looking at. Obviously the same applies if you're doing enduro racing. You of course can pick a bike from that all-mountain category and spec them out with heavier duty componentry, or you can go straight in with something like the Super Foxy, which is purpose made for this category. So as I mentioned with that all-mountain category earlier, you will only see bikes that are using the piggyback shock design in this category, because it's the descending performance that is all out. And of course, when those shocks are being compressed rapidly on loads of hits, they get hot. So the Super Foxy, as I said, it's got a coil shock on there that's designed to be consistent in the roughest, longest descents possible. You also see air shocks on here, and it very much can become down to rider preference of what they want to choose. No one is better than the other. They both offer maximum performance. Now, wheel travel, you'll find it's going to be over 150, so 160 to 180 typically on the back end of bikes like this. And again, you might find the seat stays and chain stays are just beefed up that bit more to make them a bit more stable. And then at the front end, anything up to 180mm travel can be expected. Now the head angles would definitely be slacker on these sort of super enduro style bikes, so you can expect to see things as slack as 63.5 degrees. But bikes like the Super Foxy have adjustable head cups in them, so you can actually choose the head angle that you want to run with. And quite often you'll find bikes like this have adjustable geometry in terms of chainstay length or perhaps bottom bracket height there, so you can further tune the ride qualities of these bikes. In terms of the wheels, you're going to have much sturdier wheels on bikes like these compared to the all-mountain category. So despite the fact the frames are very similar, you've got to bear in mind that the all-mountain category, the compromise is to keep them light enough so they can be up, down and over. Think of these bikes as more of a winch and plummet. They're designed to get you to the top so you can shred down. So accordingly, you're going to have wheels that are heavier but are significantly stronger. Now you'll see tyres on the muscular bikes or the non-e-bikes with increased casing, like double down casing for example, but you're going to definitely see tyres with downhill casing seen, and on the e-bikes certainly there will be downhill casing, which means they're also going to have the softest possible rubber. So this gives you the most sure-footed grip and traction, but also protection from the repeated smashing into rocks and ruts and things on the bikes like these. Now really, as I said, the EMTB version, the level, this is closer to a downhill bike than anything else, but you've got the ability to self-shuttle. Oh, and finally, we have the downhill bike. Now, unlike all the other styles of mountain bike available, the downhill bike is probably, I think it's fair to say, the only of the major bikes available on the market that has no compromises. It doesn't have to do anything except get down the side of a mountain as fast as possible. That's its single job. Now, because of that, you get a very extreme look. So note the wheelbase, the distance between the wheels is extremely long on the bike. It's got a very low standover height, like a nice long front end, and you've got these telltale big twin crown suspension forks on the front to allow maximum suspension travel and maximum stiffness. So that means they can just be ridden into the worst terrain imaginable, and you can still have pinpoint accuracy in terms of steering geometry. Now, typically, you will get bikes with 29-inch wheel these days in terms of the race bikes. It wasn't always like that. We've had all sizes over the years. It's starting to become a bit more common to see options for a mullet or an MX style setup with a smaller rear wheel there. But universally, the bigger front wheel seems to be what the racers have adopted as the fastest option. Now, wheel travel on downhill bikes tends to be 200mm front and rear. You will see some bikes with a shade less on the rear, or perhaps a shade more, but 200mm is what downhill bikes have on there. And again, these bikes are designed to just hit the worst terrain imaginable at the fastest speeds. I mean, it's unbelievable what they can be tackled on these bikes. Now, typically front forks are air shocks on there, and the rear shock absorbers can be coil or air shocks. Now, again, there's nothing better between the two of them. They both have their benefits and they both will suit different bikes and different riders. Now, we offer bikes with both offerings on there. But what you will notice with these shocks are they're far longer than what you even see on the enduro bikes. They are much bigger. You think the bike is moving a lot, there's a lot more leverage going on, there's a lot more wheel travel, and again, it's got to cope with more. The bigger the shock is, the more oil that could be on the inside, the more consistent the behavior can be on the bike. Now, downhill bikes, due to the fact they don't have to be compromising, they have adjustable geometry as well. So at the back end of this bike, you're going to see a 157mm spacing, whereas all of the traditional bikes you've seen earlier in the video will really be having a boost 148 system. Again, 157 on the back, adjustable chain stays from 440 to 460mm, adjustable head angles on the bike in two ways. You can obviously adjust the crown up and down on the fork to adjust the geometry of the bike, but you can also adjust the head angle independently of that. So typically on our summer bikes, you can get 61.5 to 63.5 as the major sort of adjustment points. But in the past, we've had bikes as slack as 59 degrees, but the race scene has universally kind of found what works best for most courses, and that's what we've settled on our summer race bikes. You can get alloy bikes and you can get carbon bikes. The alloy bikes typically can be slightly heavier, which is why the carbon bikes are often chosen as race bikes, but also carbon can offer some ride attributes they're a little bit different to alloy. They can be tuned to have stiffness and compliance in slightly different ways than you can get with the traditional alloy. Again, neither is actually better, they both have brilliant traits. And then it's onto the wheels. Now this is about all-out strength and reliability on a downhill bike. You don't have to pedal them along, you don't have to pedal them up. They just have to survive down and through anything on the way. So the rims are significantly bigger, there's more material on them. You can get carbon and alloy options, and the tyres will always have ultra thick downhill armoured casing on them, and the rubber compound will be extremely soft, so they can take purchase on anything from wet rocks to wet roots. And look at the tread pattern itself. So you get varying tread patterns, but they'll typically be quite open and aggressive to make sure the tyres can really cut in to that terrain. So as you can see, the downhill bike is completely uncompromised, and in my opinion, it's probably what makes them the coolest bikes out there, even if it's not the right bike for you. Certainly not quite right for me. And I'd love to know actually, has this video helped you identify what you need as a mountain biker? And would there be a different style of bike that you might consider? Let us know in the comments underneath. Hit that subscribe and the notifications bell. And of course, get involved in the comments if there's other types of content you'd like us to make here on Mondraker TV. We'll see you in another video soon. Take care now.